Uh, Jen, why don't we start with you since we haven't heard anything from you? Can you give us a quick little biography of yourself? Or
Sure, yeah. So I live in the Panhandle of Nebraska. I've been writing since I was a little kid, so I've been writing forever. One of the best things that I did when I was younger was write with my friends. That's what we did in school, was pass. We didn't pass notes, we passed stories and wrote those. Um, I write a lot of different genres, so urban fantasy, horror, anything to do with magic, that's what I write. In addition to being a writer, I am also an advocate for victims of sexual and domestic violence, and I am a mom of 3 cool kids.
Jason?
A biography?
Tiny biography, yeah.
Tiny biography. All right. I am 23, graduated from Gearing in 2016. I'm living in Lincoln right now and working on writing pretty much is my main thing. Work a day job to support that. And my roommate and I are both artists. He does music and I write. So that's just kind of what we're going with for now. So that's about all there is to me at the moment.
I wasn't able to get a chance to read any of your writing. Can you tell us a little bit about what you write?
Yeah, I write mostly horror. Generally, thrillers, psychological stuff, but that generally, the stuff I'm self-publishing is shooting for a horror audience. So.
Okay, Tanya?
I'm from Scottsbluff. I have been here for about 25 years, grew up in Alliance. Just started writing about maybe 10 years ago. And I did it just simply out of boredom and watching and reading other people's work, and it got too typical for me. So I kind of went the other direction and been writing ever since. And I'm getting ready to publish my 5th book, in between working a full-time job as a marketing director by day, and just love what I do.
And can you describe your writing?
People ask me that. I don't know. To me, it kind of fits in a bunch of different categories because it's romance, suspense, thriller, mystery. So I'm not really sure how it fits into one thing, and I don't really like to fit into one thing. But those would be the categories I'd give it for now, until I try something new, I guess.
I'm trying to think. There was a phrase that I thought of when I read yours, and it involved the word urban, but I can't remember the rest of it. I'll have to think of it. I'll remember it before this is all over.
Yeah, it's always something that catches me up when people are like, "What category?" It's like, I don't know.
I think you described it as small town urban fiction.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't urban. I don't think it was urban fiction. There was something else to it. I'll think of it. Okay, Bernie, tell us about your writing and your little mini biography.
Okay, mini biography. I grew up in the Sandhills there, near Hyannis on a cattle ranch. Attended Ashby 1 year, been in Hyannis most of the time, and country schools the other time. Went to the University of Nebraska. Then the Air Force, had a 21-year career in the Air Force, flying airplanes and managing. Retired to Central Arkansas there, here to be close to grandchildren. Otherwise, I'd be up in Nebraska. That's where I'd rather be, but Arkansas is where they are. So here I am. I wanted to write for many years, but I'm kind of the opposite of Jason there. I admire him that he's starting so young, because I had to have a military career to get to the point of affording my writing. So I kind of the exact opposite there. After I retired, I went to Cody, Wyoming, and I worked as a freelance writer for the Wyoming Livestock Roundup for about 2 years. Really loved that. I love freelance writing. Did quite a number of articles there in the newspaper. Several of them were multi-pages long. I was surprised that they didn't chop the heck out of them, but they printed them almost verbatim, so I felt good about that. And then that was kind of a catalyst after I went to Kuwait for 3 years stint over there, helping support the war on terror. Then I came back to retirement here in Arkansas and decided finally that I would just take the plunge and start trying to write. And I'm a little bit like Tanya in that I don't know how to describe my work. It's got a strong romantic element behind it, but my original intent was to write mysteries. I didn't really realize it was going to be kind of a romantic mystery too. A bit of psychological thriller, I suppose. I've always been interested in supernatural and psychological things, so I've got an element of that woven in, and a very unusual animal character. So I'm not quite sure what genre you would fit it in. I can relate to Tanya.
All right, so
But in a nutshell, well, the only other thing I can say is like her, or like Jen, I guess, Tanya, I'm working on my 5th book too, about chapter 7 of what I hope will be a very relevant book in everything going on in this nation today.
all right, so you've all written, some of you have written quite a few books and some of you have only written 1 or 2. Tell us about one of the best characters you've written and what makes them interesting.
Jen, do you want to start?
Who are you asking?
Sure. I will say I have lots, so I don't know if I have favorites because then they might get mad at me, but one of them that I enjoy is a character who isn't in the urban fantasy series I wrote, and that was one of the first books I published. And I thought it was interesting for her because she was very principled. She had certain set of ideas that I had to work around because she was very stubborn in what her thoughts were as far as this is the way things are. And it would have been really easy to compromise those to make the plot work. And so to have a character that was very stubborn that way in her views.
Pull a chair over here so you can see. Sorry. Oh.
So to have someone like that and kind of stretched my writing chops in that way, because it was, well, if this character wouldn't do these things, then they're not going to do these things. So I have to be true to that person while writing the story. And so that's where it helped me grow as an author, because I was able to construct a story around those limitations for her and still, in my opinion, make a story that resonated with me and was fun to write and is fun to read even now when I go back to it.
And what books is that character in?
The Devon E. Miller series is a 5-book series, and it's basically urban fantasy or portal fantasy. And it starts out with The Bazaar, which is the first book that I published.
All right, so Jason?
All right, well, I'm gonna go with a character from a book I haven't published yet, but it's similar to what Jen said. It's somebody who's very principled and they're very set in their ways. He has just some, very twisted ideas about the world, and I think it's a fun thing to be able to apply pressure to someone like that and see how you can affect their decisions or their character in general, or see how they respond, would rather probably be a better way to put it. But yeah, and so, and that plays into every character, but there's just some that are more set in their ways, and, you get to see what happens when you come up with a plot line or something that happens that really puts them to the test, so.
Tanya?
Love all my characters. Danny and Daniel, they're probably my favorites. Danny is more, the story kind of revolves around Danny and her emotional trauma. But then you have Daniel, who is just a complete goofball. So he helps me move a scene in a different direction, perhaps to take away some of the seriousness of it and almost poke fun at it and just laugh at yourself. But the way he does things, I've tried to make him a nicer person, but you can't change somebody. You kind of have to let them write themselves. And he has been so much fun to write. Even now I go back and read them and I laugh at it. It's just like only Daniel would say that. But it's helped in all the books. In this 5th book I'm publishing, it's got his perspective in it. So you kind of learn how his dirty little mind works and why he says the things he does. So, and him trying to move on with the group, it's hard to explain him. He's just a complete goofball.
All right, and Bernie.
Well, I have several characters in my books, but the one that most people like was kind of a surprise to me, but they like the animal character that I've created as a tracking animal with my private investigation team. It's a coy wolf female. And I've tried to give her as much life and characteristics from canines as I could incorporate into it. And surprisingly, most people really like that. And several have said that Missy is their favorite character in my books. So that I don't know that she would have been mine necessarily. I kind of relate to the male character of my private investigation team because I made him a retired military guy also. But probably Missy, the animal, is the most interesting.
If you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would that be? Jen?
Maybe write more when you have the opportunity. And I mean, I think that all the stuff that I did when I was younger, practicing and writing for fun, all those things really helped make it easier for me to write now. So I don't know that I would necessarily change anything. Just write and have fun with it. And don't worry so much about being wrong. Enjoy yourself, enjoy what you write, because it's, quantity begets quality eventually. So keep writing.
Jason?
I would probably say, something of the same thing. I don't think I necessarily did anything wrong. I wrote quite a bit, especially in the last few years, but, as a kid, wouldn't want to put too much pressure on myself or anything, because then I probably wouldn't have liked it that much anyway. But, just enjoying what you do, writing whatever you want, especially when you're young and just have the weirdest ideas that don't make any sense, but you might as well just try it out and see how it goes.
Tanya?
If I could tell my younger self something, it would have been pay more attention in English class. Actually appreciate those English classes instead of having to hire editors to do this. But I still go back and find stuff in my book. I'm like, oh, there you go. So yeah, I wish I would have paid more attention.
And Bernie?
Start sooner. I knew for years that I had really liked to write and seemed to have somewhat of an affinity for it, I guess. And I pity all the many Air Force people that had to put up with me for the last few years of my career, because the biggest complaint was, will you keep it short? So they'd want to know the time. I'd tell them how to build a clock, kind of that thing. But I was very thorough about my writing. I guess some of that comes from the military background, because most of my writing prior to writing fiction had been fact-based, military type writing. And same way when I freelanced wrote, that was all fact-based. But I just wish that I had pursued this. I knew it was a dream for years, but I just didn't take the plunge as early as I wish I had. So I guess the one thing I'd say is, if you know you want to write, then get started.
So some of you grew up in this area and some of you still live here. How did your time in Western Nebraska influence your writing? Jen?
Well, I think because I've basically lived in the Panhandle all my life. There's been forays other places for a while. I don't know how I'm sure it has influenced me. I mean, I write a lot about different places and different things, but I guess one of the things I like to do is take things that I've seen in life and things that I've heard and put them into a story in a different place. And I think that's kind of what I like to do. So it's just a matter of taking the things and the stories and the legends and all the cool things that are around here that if you look, you can find the stories. And if you listen, you can hear them. And then change those in little ways and stick them in different spots and have the people, you know, you can have the same people in a city or in a magical world or in another realm, and they can still be people that you can relate to because you've met them as you walk down the street. And so I think it really is just, I don't know that I'm necessarily taking something directly from here and put it in there, but it's just a matter of using those stories. And then I think having the space and the time and the quiet in some ways. When I was a kid, you know, there wasn't really anything else to do but read and write. And so having that time and that space, I think really influenced me as a creative person in general, just having that empty space to fill with my imagination.
Jason?
I think that it had a huge impact on my writings, you know, early on, especially with, I would just set things in, you know, a Gearing-esque type place. I mean, I think it's one of the most beautiful places in the country for sure, with, you know, just the bluffs and the hills, but also being really close to just open plains and solitude and the type of thing that a lot of people really don't experience. So I think it was, you know, it's a great setting for any type of spooky story, especially. So it was especially handy for me, but, you know, it's just a lot of time there for, you know, introspection, things to look at, and, you know, just ideas can really gestate and have a good opportunity to grow into something. So I think it had a huge impact for sure.
Tanya?
Yeah, being around here, growing up in Nebraska, probably the best thing I think that you could do. But in my books, it shows it's kind of got the celebrity thing in it, and they're like, you know, they're famous and they have that catered lifestyle. So to throw them back here in like the Black Hills, where it's real life, there's no, you know, there's no assistance and stage crews and all that stuff. It's just real life. Like, you know, you have to drive yourself somewhere. You have to drive 20 minutes to go get something to eat when you live out in the country. And to me, it shows the rawness of it. To me, it's more realistic. It's not painted Hollywood. And that's my biggest issues. I don't want to have the typical Hollywood story. I want it to be realistic. And I think this is the perfect place for that.
Bernie?
Yeah, it's had a big influence on my writing. Of course, I wrote for the agricultural newspaper over there when I freelanced. And then in my fiction, I grew up in rural and small community America, Nebraska. So that's generally the setting of my stories. I keep them in small communities and in the country. And I just don't like cities. And I can't imagine ever writing a book that has any kind of a city setting. You know, I'm a rural Nebraskan and will always be. So all my stories have a setting, and I guess the most populous was I have one set out of Cheyenne, where a lot of the work was done in the Cheyenne area, but it still goes out into the area, not just in the city. It's affected me a lot.
Writers tend to be readers too. What kind of books do you like to read? That wasn't on the question list. Jen, do you want to start?
I read just about everything. So when I was really young, I liked Harold and the Purple Crayon and Pippi Longstocking. Those were my favorites. And then I got into romance, much to my mother's dismay. And then I picked up a copy of Stephen King's Misery, and it had the romance cover version. And I was like, ooh, what's this? And that got me into Stephen King. And I love historical fiction, horror, romance, mysteries. I love everything. So I'll read it if it has a really good story. And I think, following good stories is a really great and fun thing as a reader. So I read everything.
Jason?
I definitely, tend to read what I write, which is horror, Stephen King for sure. I started with a lot of Goosebumps when I was a kid. I think that was a great introduction for me, and that was the type of thing that really interested me. So now I'm reading Dean Koontz for the first time, which I probably waited way too long to get into, but I'm still really trying to just branch out and read as much as I can now to expose myself to as many styles as possible. But I always tend to fall back to the thrillers, scary stuff, whatever I can get my hands on. I really like Kurt Vonnegut too.
Tanya?
I like to read everything I can get. I'd like to learn daily. I know it's a little daunting, but I like to read everything I can get. It's fun to watch other people's writing and how they write. I think it teaches us a lot. So that's kind of what I try to do as much as I can. So, yeah.
And Bernie?
I wish I read more right now. I haven't been reading anywhere nearly as much as I would like to. When I was younger, I read everything in sight. I couldn't pass a magazine, Field and Stream, or anything that was set in nature. I would stop and read. My Air Force career was busy enough that I didn't do enough reading, although I did quite a bit then. Read a lot of self-help books at that time for a while. I've always liked the mystery. That's why I've gone the direction I have in writing. I love to read a good mystery. Kind of like Jason there. If I could make the time to read a mystery, I will.
So this is a question on our list. We talk a lot about writer's block, but have you ever gotten reader's block? And did you find a specific book that got you out of it? Jen?
I have. I don't know that I have specific books. I guess what happens if I can't find anything that I really want to read, then I go back to my old favorites. And so a lot of those would be like urban fantasy series or horror or something, or a romance that I read a long time ago that just kind of feels like home. So I guess that would be my go-to, is just to go back to something that I really loved, and it helps me discover that, oh, how wonderful this is, and then you start seeing the good in the new stuff again, I think.
Jason?
I would agree with that. I've definitely had reader's block at times, but I think it's just a matter of, going to a bookstore. It's nice here in Lincoln where there's just a plethora of places like that. Just walk into a bookstore and buy a few books and try one of them out and see how it goes. And you're always going to find one that you like. So I think it's just a matter of keeping yourself, committed to reading as much as you are to writing, to make sure that you don't lapse on one or the other.
Tanya?
I agree with Jen and Jason both. I mean, I get frustrated when I can't find things to read, so I just walk away from it for a while, and I'll just work on something completely random, whether it's just designing a book cover, or sometimes I just have to take myself out of the reading because I get too many things going on and I kind of can't focus on it. So just pick up something new, something you would never read in a million years, and just start reading it, and it helps put me back into focus of what I'm doing.
And Bernie?
I'm probably in a period of reader's block right now and have been for a while. We are caregivers for two people in their 90s. And so that takes a lot of time, and kind of emotional energy goes away. And a lot of times we watch TV with them. So I end up watching more TV and not doing enough reading. But I've always been drawn to the kind of genres I was saying earlier, but I love to learn. So anything I watch on TV or read, I like to learn something from it. So I'm not into just being entertained by anything. If it doesn't intrigue me and I can't learn something from it, I just have no interest in it. But if I ever have a pause, I would go back to what I like the most, which are the thrillers and the whodunits type of stories. Those are what I like.
Jen, if one of your books was made into a movie, who would you cast to star in it?
This one's always so hard because I don't picture my people as anybody that I know on the screen, so I don't know. I don't know. I have this book that was the very first book I wrote solo. I just haven't published it, and it's a romance. And so for that one, I think it would be great to have Melissa McCarthy as the main character. I don't know who would be the romantic lead. And I can't think of his name. There's a fabulous drag queen in it as well. And I can't think of the guy's name that would play it. But definitely a drag queen. And so that would probably be the most that I could do casting wise, because I don't usually think that way. I think of them as my own people, so I'm selfish. I don't want anyone else to play them.
Jason?
I think that's a tough question, but in my published book, there's, it's a dark-haired, brooding main character pretty much. So it makes me think of a Logan Lerman or a Timothée Chalamet type of person. But yeah, that's pretty much just a guess. So I would just let them take care of that.
Tanya?
I cheat a little bit. I use a Pinterest board because I'm always scared I'm going to describe my character and then 10 pages later they have a different eye color. So I kind of focus on using a Pinterest page, and I have my characters that I love, but I want my readers to develop who they think it is, what fits into their life. So I have my opinions, but I would prefer the reader to come up with their own.
Bernie?
I had to think about this some a year ago because I decided to go out to that 2020 Pitch Fest in California and Hollywood a year ago and pitched my first book to, at that time, it was about 21 different execs out there, and 6 of whom wanted my first book as a copy of it. And I'm still waiting. Haven't had a call for a movie contract, but anyway, that was an interesting experience. And it got me thinking about that. And my male character, when I think about the type of person he is, kind of a rugged, retired military type of guy, Jeremy Renner, I think would be my pick. My wife originally said Tom Cruise, but I don't know. I prefer Renner myself. And then he's married up like a lot of us have. So he's married to a very beautiful redhead. And so I think Amy Adams would fit that bill very well. And without giving away the supernatural side of my story, there is a third character in there, a female, very pretty blonde, and Reese Witherspoon, my wife thinks would be good in that role. And I've added a couple of other characters at this point too that I'm trying to weave into this current story. So I'm just about in overload on characters, maybe too much, but we'll see how that goes.
All right, so let's see. Do you write listening to music? And if so, what music inspired your current book? Jen?
I do write listening to music sometimes. It depends on whether it's a constant, it's an easy brain day or a hard brain day. But honestly, I don't necessarily have, I have kind of mood music. So like I have a Southern Gothic playlist that I'll play when I want moody and dark. And I have, my favorite thing is hip hop. So if it's something upbeat, happy, or sexy or whatever, then that's more that side. So it's not really necessarily a particular song. I do have a book in mind that's like an epic fantasy that I want to write. And it came, that kind of, the story idea came from part from a dream and part from a song. And that was Take Me to Church, that song. And So I have that kind of percolate in the back of my brain. So I would say that would be one book that's actually specifically related directly to a song that I could point at. Otherwise, it's mainly vibes and the feeling of songs and how they inspire the writing or the emotion that I'm trying to convey.
Jason?
I can't listen to music while anything with lyrics generally distracts me too much. I lose my train of thought. But I actually found I listened to binaural beats videos on YouTube, the concentration ones. I don't know what the science really is behind that, but I think it works as far for me, you know, it helps keep me focused. So that's definitely been a boon for my productivity, actually. So that's what I listen to. No music really, but I wish I could.
Tanya?
My books kind of are around a rock band, so I tend to listen to a lot of rock. But you know, like Jen and Jason said, I listen to, like, when I'm writing about a scene, they are going to a fancy party, you kind of put that background music noise on, and it helps you kind of like get into the situation so you can describe it better. So I kind of listen to everything.
Bernie?
I don't listen to music when I'm writing. I'd probably find it a little too distracting, but sometimes I might take a break and listen to songs that I think stimulate my creativity in that particular area. Sarah Mclaughlin is one of my favorites that I think about with my first book, The Arms of an Angel. If I were to pick any one song as a theme for that first book, that's what I would pick, The Arms of an Angel. It relates to the overall story very well. You have to get to the last page to know that, but but as far as listening to music while I'm writing, I don't.
Okay, well, our time's about half up, so I'm going to switch over and we'll talk about publishing and marketing. What do you wish you'd known or done differently at the beginning of your foray into publishing? Jen?
There's always so much to everything that I think it would be hard to take what I know now and give it to myself when I was younger. Probably, I think the biggest thing is if you really want to sell books, you got to have really good covers. And so the cover that I started out with wasn't great. And it was when I made myself, I make all my covers, and I've learned a lot since then. So it's really just about, you know, you're going to have to decide, younger self, are you really burning to put this out there? And is it really the time that you want to put it out there? Do you want to wait and save up money to buy a cover until you're good enough at making your own, you know, that kind of thing. So I think it really is what kind of decisions work best for you at the time. But covers are really important. So I'd probably say wait and have a better cover so that you can have the best shot at this first book that you can.
Jason?
Well, I'm very much, you know, towards the beginning of my publishing attempts. And so I'm still learning a lot about everything that goes into it, marketing and all that. You know, it's probably something you'd never learn completely. That's always going to be an ever-changing thing. But as far as what I would do differently, you know, just pay attention and really, you know, fine tune things. And it takes a lot of trial and error, I think, and I need to have more trials and more errors before I really have a grasp on it. But just, you know, going and doing your best, trying every time, trying to change something and see what sticks. So.
Tanya?
I wish I would have been more patient when I put my first book out. I was so happy with it and excited about it. I had a few people read it prior to kind of get some reviews about it. And so I had people help me with it as far as like formatting it and the book covers and all that stuff. And towards the second and third and fourth, fifth book, I quit doing that. I'm like, it gives me an opportunity to learn the publishing side, and I've from start to finish, I have published my own books. I format them, design the covers, the graphic design, the marketing, everything. And it's the best thing I've done now, because now I know how to do it and I learned something from it.
And Bernie?
Wish I could copy Tanya. I probably made every mistake imaginable initially. We designed our first, I had my wife help me design the first cover, and it was a good cover for what it was at the time, but it wasn't sufficient for long-term picture. And since then, I've been working with a graphics designer down here in Little Rock that helps turn my ideas into a cover. She does a very good job with that. And I wish I had used, well, I didn't even know about her for my first book, but I would use her again on my first book if I could. And as far as the marketing is concerned, I've got a lot to learn there. I made the mistake of trying to use a couple of, well, one in particular of these, I forget what they're called, a glamour publishing or something like that. That's not the title. You know what I'm talking about. But all they did was take my money.
Yep.
So that was an experience in what not to do, because they wanted you to be paid to breathe, and then everything else that goes with breathing. So that was a total waste of a bunch of money. And I wish I'd just followed Tanya's lead had I known her and done it that way.
So you all kind of mentioned book covers. What goes into the process of designing a cover, and what do you think makes a good book cover? Jen?
I think market research is really important. So you need to know what your genre is. And then you need to go to Amazon and you need to go to the top 100 books and look at what's selling at the time. And you need to understand that you don't have to recreate a scene from your book on the cover. It's not meant to do that, really. What the cover is meant to do is sell the book. And so you really just want the flavor of your book there. You want people to know immediately what the genre is. You want them to be able to see the title and the author name, even when it's shrunk down to small thumbnail size. And so you really want to consider it and look at it as a marketing tool rather than getting attached to it and feeling like this is the dream that I had. Because if you really want to sell the book and get it into people's hands so that they can read it, then you need to have the best foot forward. And that's really figuring out what makes a marketable book cover and doing your research, taking it to places like Indie Book Covers on Facebook, which is a fabulous group for getting critique on your covers. And then I'm in there and I just look at how people critique other covers so I can learn. And, you know, what fonts do they use for different genres? Is it a painted type cover? Is it photos from Deposit Photo? So you just really need to kind of put on your marketing business hat instead of your creative hat to kind of get started on what you want for your cover.
Jason?
I think those are all good points. For me personally, I've entrusted it to other people thus far, you know, someone who knows what they're doing with designing and whatnot, and who has a, you know, a general idea about what would go, you know, what makes a good cover and whatnot, because that is a hugely important part, probably the most important part by far for self-publishing. So you know, maybe one day I'll have the confidence to try it myself, but right now I'd rather just make sure that it looks as good as possible and we'll get, you know, the right attention for the genre and what it's trying to be. So I'm not making any myself, but definitely it's a very important part. And I spent a lot of time, you know, checking out designers and trying to find the right one. So
Tanya?
Like Jen said, I think it's market research. You got to figure out what, like the top 100, what do they all have in common? Does it fit your book? Does it fit your characters? Is it realistic without giving away everything? And I don't like to do typical. I don't want to do what everybody else is doing. I think I prefer to do it my own way. So I don't really put it out there for people to critique it, because to me it's like, it's a personal thing. Like, I want to like it. I want it to represent the story, and I want it to be true to my characters, because everybody's going to have an opinion. Everybody's going to have an opinion of what it should be on the cover, how it should be on the cover, what font you use. So I just do what I feels best and just I've even done my covers over once already, and they fit better now that I've done research and started looking at what everybody else is doing.
Bernie?
Yeah, I'm still learning where it comes to covers. I would love to go back and start a lot of this over again. I'm one of those who has focused much of my time on the writing aspect of getting the story out and not enough on all the other things that go with it. So I could really use somebody who has a handle on all that stuff so I can focus on what I like to do, which is to write. But as a self-publisher, as Jason is learning, you have to do it all, at least at the beginning. So you have to do that too, as Tanya and Jen both know. And I am learning that, but I have a long way to go. My covers have gotten better steadily, especially since I'm working with this graphics designer. The better I can describe to her what I envision in a cover that might grab somebody's attention, which is how I approach the cover. Is it doesn't necessarily have to relate to the book all that closely, but does it get a reader's attention who might see it laying on a table? So I'm learning at least that much, but I do have a lot still to learn.
Jen, do you have any publishing goals for the future?
One thing that I've done is gotten involved with a book set group, which is just a bunch of different, mainly romance authors, but not all romance authors. And they publish box sets, and they do a lot of short stories that go with that. And so I've been doing quite a few of those because it gets my writing in front of people that might not ordinarily pick up my stuff. So that's one thing. And then just I'm going to keep finishing some of the series that I have started and keep writing because it's a lot of fun. So just continue to write the things that I really enjoy writing and creating these stories and then getting them out there so that people can read them.
Jason?
For this year, I'm trying to finish, it's a trilogy, to get a trilogy of books out. If I had it my way, you know, almost all my books would be standalones. I don't generally tend to just write series by nature. That just, my books tend to be self-contained. So this was kind of, you know, really had to direct my focus on coming up with a series that I could make, and it's still only 3 books, but it's like my trial run at publishing, and I'm going to try to use that to learn as much as I can for marketing and all that. But you know, so hopefully then it'll also help me maybe write more series in the future. But yeah, so it's just, I'm trying to get these 3 books self-published and then really just learn as much as I can from this first attempt.
Tanya?
It's for the 5th book that's coming out. I am completely doing it all by myself. I'm doing every part of the self-publishing by myself, and I've learned so much with it and absolutely love the knowledge that I've got from it. And, you know, as writers, we take a step back when we start getting reader's block or writer's block and start working on something else because we all have 10 other projects going on. And I've started another series, and it's a little ambitious, I guess. This 5th book that I'm publishing in the Danny series, this next series runs like right alongside that book and starts a new series with new characters, and I'm going to again try to completely do it by myself without anybody's help so I can learn and help others, because that's what I want to do. I want to help you guys. I want people that don't know this stuff, you know, what good are we if we don't share that knowledge with other authors? I wish, you know, I would have had more of that, but I didn't know where to look because I was new.
Bernie, do you have any publishing goals?
Yes, a couple. One is to finish this 5th book. I'm probably roughly halfway into it now. I'm working on chapter 7. All my books have grown in complexity. As I was saying, the number of characters, this is a series, so each one steps into the next one. You have to read the first in order to get the full background that you would need to read the second, and so on. So I'm using the same characters, but expanding as I go. I started out with 2 characters plus the coy wolf, and now I have 3 full-time characters plus a coy wolf, and then I'm introducing the daughter and grandkids of the couple into this story as well to make them more human and more believable, and relatable, I guess is the word that I'm looking for. I want people to relate to these characters so that if they bleed, you feel like you're bleeding, that sort of thing, as you go. So that's a definite goal of mine. I want them to be believable. I'm still working. I don't know if I'll go beyond this 5th one in this series or not. If I can pull this one off, it relates very much to, in fact, I'm thinking of calling it An Evil Runs Through It, to the real mess that's in the undercurrent of our American society. All my books have a social issue woven into the story. You may not even recognize it, but it's sort of the foundation from where the story goes and comes from. So this one will be the most complex and perhaps the most demanding of all yet. So I'm not sure if I'm going to go beyond this one. I might try going into real life writing, take a missing person, a real missing person, and try to give voice to their absence, So I'm thinking about doing that.
How did publishing your first book change your writing process? Jen?
I don't know that it changed it necessarily. I think I wrote that one with the intention of publishing it. So I think it was just mainly the fact that I could do it. Look at that, I did it, and now I can do it again. I know I can do it this first time, so I can do it again. So it's really, it's always a learning process. Like everybody said, you learn something new every time you start a book, you write on that book and you finish it. And so then you want to kind of expand on the things that you learned and play with those new things that you learned and hopefully make an even better story the next time.
Jason?
I think the most valuable thing I did for sure was hiring an editor for my first one. I think that'd be the number one advice I'd give anybody is at least once, send it to a professional editor, because it highlighted so many crutches that I had become blind to, and just, phrases that I defaulted to all the time that I didn't realize I was doing. So, and you can take that one critique and apply it to every single thing you've written. So that's incredibly valuable. That was definitely the best part of the publishing process for me, was seeing all these things. And it was just such an eye-opening experience to know that someone who really knows what they're doing is finding all these errors, because that just helps you know that you've got that much room to get better, and it makes the next book better and better there on out.
Tanya?
Well, I did everything wrong the first time I wrote. I ended up just writing a 2,500 page Word document. Well, obviously we can't publish and print a 2,500 page book. So I quickly learned what's important, what's not important, what's redundant, what don't need to be in there, what has nothing to do with them, even though to you it's hilarious. So it took, probably 2 years for me to whittle these books down to like 3 books is what it ended up being. But I have so many pages of stuff removed from books, and I go back and read it, and it's like, wow, my writing was horrible. But like Jason said, you get in there and you get the author in it, and they start pointing out things that you say like seem all the time, and little phrases you don't realize you're saying. And just from that first book and to this 5th book, it's been a completely different world for me. And I'm glad that it happened that way, because I learned what not to do, and kind of format as you go has made it so much easier.
Bernie?
I can relate to Jason very closely in that I did not hire an editor to begin with. We were on a rather tight budget, partly as a result of caregiving. That had created a lot of debt for us. So I did the math and didn't think I could afford an editor. In hindsight, I wish I had found a way to afford it anyway, because I made so many errors in that first book. I practically had to rewrite this crazy thing. And then this one company that I was alluding to earlier, they did give me some pretty good review suggestions from reviewing that book, which initially after I got done fuming and let it sit for overnight, I realized that they had a lot of good inputs. So I tried to apply those then from that point on, and that was a big help. All the help that you can get is what I'm finding is very valuable in whatever way it comes from. As far as I don't know if you mentioned style, but one thing I have been doing all along and probably won't change right now as long as I'm in this mystery genre. I've never diagrammed my stories. I just free flow them. And I like that style. It makes it a little harder to maybe keep up with sometimes, but when you're trying to write something creative like a mystery, to me, it gives me the latitude to turn right, turn left, go back, go up, go down, and make a change. I'm not tied to some diagram on the wall. So I like that flexibility of just winging it, so to speak. And I'm blessed with a very logical personality. So I know that if I have a point A and a point B, that I have to make everything in between tie together. So logic helps in that process.
What are you finding is the best way to market your books, Jen?
So I think it's been really helpful. When I first started writing, I just kind of wrote what I wanted to write, and I still write what I want to write, but I have a bigger eye on what the market wants. And originally it was like, well, how do you write what the market wants when you don't really write what the market wants? But it's really about finding kind of your niche in the market and carving your own space. So the most successful books that I've written have been written to a specific market. And I just put my own spin on it. And I found that I can really, when you have a box that you kind of have to fit into, you would think that it kind of stifles your creativity, but actually, just like with that character who this is the way I think, and if that's not the way I think, but this is the way I think, so I have to figure out how to, write this story. It's the same kind of thing. If you put yourself into this little box, all of a sudden you come up with these amazing creative things that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise because of those other constraints upon you. And so when I first heard it, so it's like a specific genre within the romance genre, which is really hot right now. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go ahead and try it and see. And I'm not going to write the way I think this genre works because that's not how I write anyway. I want to still have characters that have agency and, I still want all these things. And it turns out you can do that just fine. So I would say the best way to market is to fit yourself into a really popular stream of things and hook up with other authors, write, find those box sets and write stories about your world to fit in this box set so that other readers in that genre or in that particular market can read what you write, and then suddenly they're going to your stuff and reading that too. So it really is kind of just jumping in the stream and still having your own say in what you do.
Jason?
I'm definitely still, in a fledgling state for marketing. I only have the one book published so far, but as far as what Jen said, I'm definitely trying, really hard on this series to write to a specific market. And, it's from what I've read, it's mostly, it's not the first book that sells the series. It's more like the second, third, and so on sells the previous books. So I'm trying to, get the catalog there and then really dive into the marketing so that there's multiple books, that it's not just a one-off and then they forget about it. Because you want, you need to have some staying power to really get a foothold in. So that's kind of what I'm working on now, definitely trying to write to that specific market. And after that, it'll be, trial and error with different marketing tactics, trying to get it in people's hands. So.
Tanya?
I work in marketing, so it's kind of, it's a tricky, slippery slope, you could say. I look at what's working for other authors right now. And if you look, Facebook used to be the thing, Facebook, and then it went to Instagram. And right now, TikTok is blowing up. And I've just started getting on there. And I am just amazed all the other authors that are on there. And you look at what they're doing, you look how many views they're getting on their ads. that kind of gives you a little guidance where you should go. So, I mean, it's helped me tremendously to stick with what's working right now. When I first started marketing, I just used Amazon and Kindle marketing, and it did okay. But as soon as you put it out there on Facebook and Instagram, it doubled. So it's just, you got to find out what works right now. And right now, you just get on TikTok and kind of see what's going on. And it's amazing how many views. I put a post on there and it's had like 800 views just by posting that on there. That's more beneficial for marketing for me than my Amazon stuff.
Bernie?
I'm making a lot of mental notes as I'm listening to everybody else because that is an area that I could definitely use some boning up on. Of course, I published initially through Amazon's Kindle, and before COVID got in the way of everything, I was going to such groups as Cozy Mystery Writers and getting reviews from them. And I got some very good reviews that way. But as far as the other social media platforms that Tanya mentioned, I definitely can see that I need to get more into those. I'm somewhat computer literate. It's not that I'm totally illiterate in that regard. It's just I don't like doing it. So I haven't done enough of that sort of thing. And I think going forward, based on everything I've known and plus what I'm hearing from you guys, I think that's definitely a way I need to get better at. Particularly, I've never even dreamed of using TikTok. I don't know the first thing about TikTok, except my son-in-law has sent me a few interesting, funny videos. But as far as using it as a marketing tool, I'm clueless, but start somewhere.
It's addictive and dangerous, so be careful.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I can see that.
Do you guys, do you have a website? You guys, each one of you? Jason, you do? Okay. If you guys want to send me an email, or Kira, however, doesn't matter, with your contact information and your website and stuff like that, when I put this video up, I will include that. And so that if someone comes on here like, hey, how do I get hold of this person? We can make that happen for you.
Okay.
I think we kind of have one last question.
Yeah, how did your work and your writing change you as a person? Jen?
I think I've always kind of been author-minded and writing-minded. I think it's changed me as a person because I've been trying new things. You know, you reach out to people to figure out what they're doing. You know, your book's selling, how does that work? You know, and so you learn to reach out and you learn to network, which is something that just still seems hideous, but it's something that can be really helpful for your author, for your books, and for getting them out there and learning new techniques and trades. So I think that's part of it. Being more business minded, as far as, you know, figuring out all the things like Tanya said about what goes into self-publishing a book, and then, you know, changing and being the editor, and then changing and then being the marketer, and then changing and being the designer. And so learning all those aspects and finding out, hey, I'm not too bad at this, and I can do this, and it's, you know, look at all that. And then, you know, and you especially know how much you know once someone new comes up and says, how do you do that? And you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff. I don't know where to start. So I guess it's just, you know, knowing that I can do it. I think, you know, giving me confidence. I think that's probably how it's changed me the most, is the confidence that it's brought, knowing that I can do all of these things and still enjoy myself.
Oh, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think it's made me a lot more resourceful as far as, you know, thinking about the business side of things. You know, I'm very young. I haven't, you know, fully had a chance to dive into something like that, but I'm trying to do it with writing, you know, while I'm still at the precipice of the rest of my life. So it certainly, you know, gives me extra drive to, you know, work hard and try to figure out, you know, a way to make things work. As far as just writing in general, I think it's made me more mindful, you know, and just, I think I'm more present in everyday life, just seeing things, you know, and not trying, not just living for the next moment, because you never know when something unique's going to happen that might stick out, or you hear somebody use an expression that you want to write down because it's just really unique or something like that. But yeah, so I think it's definitely changed me, but I was also always a writer as a kid, so that's just kind of growing with writing more than writing changing me, I would say.
Tanya?
The first book that I wrote and published, it was almost like I took it personally, the reviews. In this fifth book, I have learned that I'm not writing for one person. I'm not writing for their taste, their perception of life. I'm writing the story I want to write. So I've learned from book one to book now that you don't have to write. Nobody has to like what you do. As long as you like what you do and you put it out there, the reviews are great to sell your books, but don't take it personally. They're not aimed at hate or making you feel bad about what you're doing. And it's a very tricky thing that first time hearing a bad review, somebody's critiquing your grammar, and here you are in book 5 and it's been through 2 editors and multiple rereads of yourself. And it kind of gives you a little perspective that you're not perfect. You're going to make mistakes. No, I mean, if you're looking for an error in your book, you're always going to find one. So don't take it personally. It just keep doing what you want to do. And it makes us better writers at the end of the day.
Bernie?
I'm a little older than many writers that get started doing this, so I came in rather late in life. So it probably hasn't changed me, excuse me, all that much at this point in time, other than because I focus a lot on character development in my stories and trying to come up with realistic and believable characters. I think if anything has changed, I'm probably more attentive to character traits in people and really seeing people, rather than just looking at them, actually seeing them, which in the military environment, sometimes you do a little too much of that, the latter. And so I think I'm more attentive to traits in people, not just blue-eyed and blonde-haired, but, the way they talk, the mannerisms and those kind of things. That would probably be a noticeable change, I think.
Well, I think we've used up our hour. This has been really, really interesting, and I've learned a lot, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your Saturday afternoon to do this with us.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Yeah,
you. It was a lot of
Thank
fun.
you.
Okay,
Nice
well,
to meet you other guys too.
Yeah,
You
nice.
too.
You too.